Republican, who was assured of a win, so they thought. Some secret divorce records were illegally unsealed, a sex scandal was uncovered, and Ryan was sunk. But where did and that's why Mr. Romney has to face what he is today. These bogus stories about gay haircuts when he was a young man, and his tax returns, and his time with Bain Capital. The Communist Party recently came out with a story that Bain Capital was linked to the El Salvadorian death squads. Can you believe that one? We'll see if that comes out later. So, David Axelrod, where did he learn his trade? Well, when he came to Chicago in the early 70s, he was picked up, he studied political science at the university in Hyde Park, picked up and mentored by two very prominent Chicago journalists, Don Rose and David Cantor. Now, these guys all worked together, the three of them, as a team in the Carol Moseley Brown election and the second Harold Washington campaign. They all got it, these two guys got Mr. Axelrod his first job in journalism. They were his mentors for about 7 or 8 years. But before they'd done that, they had run a little publication out of Hyde Park, Chicago, called the Hyde Park Kenwood Voices. And this was the voice of the Hyde Park left. It carried articles about Quentin Young's trip to North Vietnam to aid the communists, about his son Ethan's trip to Cuba to cut sugarcane for Castro. Also had a regular column by a local congressman named Abner Mikva. Now, he was a major opponent, a Democrat, major opponent of your Second Amendment. He hated gun rights. And when he left Congress, he became a professor at the University of Chicago, a law professor. He also became an open supporter of Democratic Socialists of America. He also became a very strong, close friend and mentor to Mr. Obama. He was also a close friend and a mentor for several years to another American lawyer I'm sure you're all familiar with, Elena Kagan, who now serves on your Supreme Court. Now, these two people, Don Rose, communist fronter since the 1940s, he was the man who coined the phrase, "The whole world is watching." And that was during the big riots in Chicago in 1968, which Mr. Rose helped to organise. He was a long-time executive member of a wonderful sounding organisation, the Chicago Committee to Defend the Bill of Rights. Wouldn't you all like to belong to that one? Except it was the Communist Party's main front in Chicago. The other half of the partnership, David Cantor. His father was Harry Cantor, leader of the Massachusetts Communist Party in the 1930s. In 1932, he took his whole family, including baby David, to the Soviet Union, where they lived for many years. He was granted a personal audience with Comrade Stalin. He was even allowed to employed translating Lenin's works from Russian into English. And if you're a communist, that is like being allowed to translate the Bible. That's a big time. The 1940s, both David and Harry Cantor were living in Chicago, both active in the Communist Party. In 1948, Harry Cantor bought a communist publication, the Chicago Star, off its owner. Why did the owner want to sell it? Well, he was moving to Hawaii, because that was Frank Marshall Davis. Go forward to 1960. David Cantor and his best friend Leroy Rollins, Communist Party member as well, who incidentally went on to found an organisation called Veterans for Peace, yet another communist anti-military front, had a little publication company called Trans World Publications. And these guys were getting a regular subsidy from the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. to distribute communist and Russian literature all over your country. The two men were actually required by your government to formally register as agents of the Soviet Union. Go forward to 1964. Anybody here, I'm sure there aren't, remember the famous race between Barry Goldwater and Lyndon Johnson? Yep. Any Goldwater girls in the audience? Good for you, ma'am. Good for you. Well, Lyndon Johnson, the Democrat, won. We got the Great Society, the biggest expansion of welfarism and federal power since the New Deal. Done huge damage to this country. The other guy, Barry Goldwater, he was a conservative, a Republican, a constitutionalist, a true patriot. He would have loved the Tea Party, and the Tea Party would have loved him. But he didn't win. One of the main reasons he lost, because he was viciously vilified in the press of this country as a racist, a fascist, and an extremist. Any of those words familiar to some of you guys here? Vaguely familiar? No accident. It's the same people. Because one of the main sources of the vilification of Barry Goldwater was Trans World Publications out of Chicago, David Cantor's little communist firm. So your Mr. Axelrod got his training at the hands of a Soviet-paid professional black propagandist and character assassin. That is why Mr. Axelrod is as ruthless and as dirty as he is. So that brings me to what I consider, what is the agenda of the left in this country? Is it to make you like France, as some people tell you, eating croissants and drinking Vin Rouge all day? Is that so bad? Well, you're right, you know. But I want to say what the real agenda is, in my opinion. And to do that, I want to build up a little bit of credibility for a retired Albuquerque high school math teacher named Mark Rudd. Now, who the heck is Mark Rudd? Anybody know? You're right, sir. He was the brains of the Weather Underground terrorist organisation. He was right up there as one of the top leaders with Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dawn. In 1968, he led the SDS riots at Columbia University, which closed down the university for weeks. In 1969, he was in Cuba training under a KGB major. But in 2006, Mark Rudd and Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dawn and Jeff Jones, another Weather Underground leader who incidentally helped to write Obama's stimulus package, and Tom Hayden and Angela Davis and David Graeber, one of the key founders of the Occupy movement, and a whole bunch of communists and socialists set up a new organisation with another wonderful sounding name, Movement for a Democratic Society. And in 2008, Movement for a Democratic Society spawned an offshoot organisation headed by Tom Hayden, and it was called Progressives for Obama. And Mark Rudd endorsed Progressives for Obama. So what I'm trying to say here is that Mark Rudd is a key member of the US left and has worked closely with people like Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dawn who know Obama very, very well. So when he predicts Obama's agenda, I will give him some credibility. So in 2008, November, just after the election, President-elect Obama appointed some conservatives to positions in the defence establishment. And some people on our side of the fence, poor naive souls, breathed a sigh of relief. Oh, maybe he's a moderate. Maybe we can trust this guy. Maybe he won't be so bad after all. But the left were absolutely spewing. They were livid at what Obama had done. And Mark Rudd's inbox was filling up with irate emails from comrades all over the country. What the hell is our president doing putting conservatives into the hated military-industrial complex? And Mark Rudd knew he had a problem. He had to settle the troops down, get them back on board with the president. So he wrote a little article for the Rag blog out of Texas, November 28, 2008, still online, called Let's Get Smart About Obama. And this is what he said to settle the troops down. Obama is a very strategic thinker. He knew precisely what it would take to get elected, and he didn't blow it. He knew he had to play to the centre to not be run over by the press, the Republicans, or to scare centrist voters away. He made it. So he has a narrow mandate for change. The economic agenda will stress stimulus from the bottom at times and handouts to the top at others. Is that what's happened? Yep. But never, never threaten the military budget. Leave the military, that will unite a huge majority of Congress against him. Leave the military alone because they're way too powerful for now. By the second or third year of this recession, people may begin to discuss cutting the military budget. Where are we now, folks? 3 years in, right? 4 years. You're worried about your jobs, your businesses, keeping your kids in college. America is focused on the economic issues, and who can blame you? But while you're doing that, smiling Leon Panetta over your Defence Department is cutting your military to ribbons. 20% of US federal spending is taking well over 50% of the cuts. Whole divisions of the Army, weapon systems, big chunks of the Navy, all going. All of it. And who do you think is cheering this on? Could it be the people that Mitt Romney described recently, very correctly, as this country's #1 geopolitical foe, the Russians? The people who have been funding your peace movement for decades to achieve just that? The people who worked with Alice Palmer and Frank Marshall Davis? Mr. Obama has talked about cutting the US nuclear arsenal down to 292 nukes. He's commissioned a paper to see how it can be done. You used to have more than 6,000. The Russians today have more than 1,500 that we know about, let alone because you people can survive a depression. This is not about losing some of your rights because you're Americans and you'll stand up and take them back. But have you ever been in a position before when your Commander-in-Chief and your Secretary of Defense are giving everything that your #1 enemy wants militarily? Doing exactly what they want. You project this forward 4 years, ladies and gentlemen. How much military do you think you'll have left? And you think about this. If you were a Russian or a Chinese leader or an Iranian leader and America had 8 years of Obama and hardly any military left, then some Republican came back and said, I'm going to restore the military. Do you think they would sit on their hands while I let you do it? They would strike because they would not run that risk when they had you exactly where they wanted you. So is this a serious situation, folks? If this carries on, you will not only not be able to defend your allies like Israel and Australia and Britain, you will not be able to defend your homeland. And you will have little choice but to be incorporated into some sort of United Nations world superstate or face the combined military might of Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba, and all their crazy allies, with not a friend in the world to come to your aid. So Mr. Obama wasn't quite finished. Mr. Rudd wasn't quite finished. He went on to say, Obama plays basketball. I'm not much of an athlete. I barely know the game. But one thing I do know is you have to be able to look like you're doing one thing, but do another. That is why all these conservative appointments are important. The strategy is to feint right, move left. Any other strategy invites sure defeat. So surely that's an admission by Mr. Rudd that his president, following a strategy that Mark Rudd seems to be privy to, has always been a leftist, pretended to be centrist, and he has got your military as his #1 target. Now, I could go